Okay, today we're going to learn Yevamot daf Pechet, a very basic, interesting daf, but it will be long, be warned. Okay, what we saw yesterday was this crazy case where a woman, her husband goes abroad. It's not so crazy. It could very likely happen, and there are cases nowadays, goes abroad, doesn't come back. One witness comes along and says the person is dead, and the woman goes to remarry based on that, and that is the law. She's allowed to get remarried. However, if it turns out he's alive, she gets majorly penalized, and that we saw all in the Mishna yesterday, even though there were a few differing opinions, but the main opinion is she gets really penalized. And the main thing here really that we're going to deal with in the beginning of today's daf is it says that basically she can get remarried based on that one witness. And how could that possibly be? Torah law is al pi shnayim edim yakum davar, two witnesses. So how do we get to one witness? So the Gemara said, right, and this was all, by the way, I just have to point out, I'm not going to really deal with this, but it's a very interesting question. Just the language of the Mishnah is certainly not so clear. It started up and said, Amru la, they said to him, they said to her that he's dead, which sounds plural, many people, but in the end, the Mishnah says it must be, the Gemara says, the Mishnah must be referring to one person because they also had this ambiguous language in the middle, which said, or toward the end, if she was married shelo bireshut, without permission, then she's allowed to go back to her husband's house. And I said, that sounds weird. What do you mean without permission, right? It sounded like the first time was with permission, and this is without it. We're going to be more strict with when there was no permission. Less strict when there was no permission. Seems weird. So therefore, they assumed the only possibility must be the first part was one witness, and the second part was two witnesses, just without the court. And then we saw the difference. If there's court, then she doesn't have to bring a sacrifice. Sacrifice for what? Well, a sacrifice for sleeping with someone she shouldn't have by accident, right? She didn't mean to. For that, you bring a sacrifice to atone for her sin. But you don't do that if the court told you, right? There's three levels. There's one witness, she can go get remarried, but if she was wrong, major penalty. Two witnesses, no penalty, she can, right? But she does have to bring a korban. Two witnesses and the court verified it, it goes on the court's head, and she's excused from the sacrifice. Okay? So the Gemara had said, right, from here we can assume that they're talking about one witness and Echad Ne'eman. So now we're going to say, Utnan Nami, I'm about 10 lines from the bottom of Pezayin Amud Bet. It also says in the Mishnah that we said this yesterday, but we'll read it again. They allow women to get remarried based on hearsay testimony, based on Isham Pi Isha, Isham Pi Eved, Isham Pi Shivcha, even a woman from a slave or even a woman from a maidservant. Okay, all those we're going to be super lenient here. Next. Utnanam. Now we're going to have, okay, so again, that teaches you Echad Ne'eman. Comes the Gemara and brings another Mishnah where we see this concept. Utnanami, in a totally different context. Classic example of a mistake is someone who eats chelev. Chelev are the forbidden fats. There's shuman in the animal and there's chelev. Shuman is permitted, chelev is forbidden. It's sometimes very easy to get tricked between the two of them because they don't look terribly different necessarily. So there's all these cases in the Gemara all the time of mistakes that happen with chelev. And then you bring a sin offering, a korban chatat, because you made a mistake. So in this case, one witness comes along and says, look, you ate chelev. And the person who was accused says, I didn't eat chelev. Patur, the person doesn't have to bring a sacrifice. If they don't believe they did anything wrong, they don't bring a sacrifice. Why? Well, what you can infer from here is the reason you're exempt is why tamad amal lo achalti, because you said I didn't eat. Ha ishti. Sounds like if you were just silent, if someone came and accused you of eating chelev and you just didn't respond, sounds like from this, you would be obligated to bring a korban. Alma, there's another proof that one witness is proven to be believed in a d'oraita case. Well, now the Gemara wants to know minalan. Where do we get this from? So they say Tanya, ohoda alav chatato. Okay, we're going to bring 4 attempts to prove, or actually 3 attempts to prove where do we get this on a Torah level, this law that we believe one witness in our case. And seemingly right now we're going to say in the chelev case, although soon we're going to say it's not like the chelev case at all. But right now, as if it is, we're going to bring a proof that on a Torah level, Echad is Ne'eman. We're going to bring 3 attempts to prove it. 1 directly from the Torah. 2, it's going to be called svara, logic from the Torah. In the end, 4th answer is going to be, it's not by Torah law, it's rabbinic law here coming in. Really, Torah would not believe one witness and allow her to remarry, but the rabbis did, and we'll see why. That's the interesting part. Okay, so now let's understand. It says in the pasuk about bringing a sin offering, "Oh hoda alav chatato." It became known to him his sin. V'lo shiyodu acherim. Now, hoda alav means I know that this happened, which sounds like I know why, because I figured it out, but not that somebody else told me. So does that mean if someone else told me and I didn't deny it, I don't have to bring a korban chatat? That doesn't make sense. Does it have to be that I discovered it myself? Or could it be that someone told me and I just was silent? So they say, where do you learn that halacha from? Well, Talmud Lamar, hodai lav. Any way you found out, as long as you know now and you accept it, you're liable to bring a korban. So what do you see here now? What's the case that someone told you ate chelef? One witness or two witnesses? Well, if there's a special drasha to teach you that we believe whoever tells you, right, they can obligate you a korban as long as you don't deny it. Well, if two witnesses came and I didn't deny it, I don't need a pasuk for that. I already know 2 witnesses can make me liable for anything. Of course, they can make me liable for a korban. It must be one. And if I don't deny it, they're believed. What do you infer from here? Here's a great proof. Okay? Because it must be, there's a drasha from the Torah to teach you. The aid can cause you to, one witness can cause you to have to bring a korban as long as you don't deny it. Well, wait a minute. Maybe it's not because there's 2 things going on here. One is the witness came along and said it, testified. Is it his testimony that does it? Or you didn't deny it. Now, maybe shtika, we say, is kahoda'ah. I'm going to get to this many times in monetary cases. If you're silent, it means you're admitting it's true. So maybe because it's like you're admitting it's true. And that's why you're obligated to korban, not because of the one witness. There's 2 parts here. There's your silence. Your silence is significant. And now we're going to prove that really this law is because of shtika koda'ah, and therefore this is irrelevant to our purposes. Teda, we're going to prove further. The katani seifa. Okay, we had this Mishna that said, if someone says achal tachelev and you said I didn't eat, then you're patur from korban if you deny it. But the implication was if you didn't deny it, you'd have to bring a korban. The end of that Mishna says, and we won't yet get to our point about shtika right away, so be patient. Amru shnayim achal tachelev, v'hu omer lo achalti. What if 2 came and said you eat chelev, and I said I didn't eat chelev? Now, what would we say? So Tanakama says patur, which is very strange. Rabbi Meir says chayav. Right? Rabbi Meir mechayev. I'm a Rabbi Meir. Kavachomer. If 2 witnesses say you murdered someone and you deny it, do we believe you? Of course not. 2 witnesses and your denial equals death penalty. Okay? So, lo yavi'u lidei korban akal. 2 witnesses say you ate chelev and you deny it. You're not going to have to bring a korban. He says to the rabbis, what are you talking about? How could you possibly exempt him? Of course, you're going to be obligated to korban. To which the rabbis say, no. This is what we call amigo. Since, at least the way Rashi reads this, since you could have had a better claim, we believe you for your claim that you said. What's your better claim? Well, if someone says you did something and you deny it, that's not so easy. People are going to not trust you. But if you say, you're right, I ate the chelev, but I did it intentionally. Now, the chatat only comes, you're only obligated korban when you do it accidentally, unwittingly. In this case, if you say, I did it on purpose, you'll be exempt from a korban also. So therefore, when you deny it, we assume you're telling the truth, because if you wanted to just get out of bringing a sacrifice, you just say, I did it on purpose. And then you get out of doing a sacrifice. It's a little bit convoluted because you're actually saying I did something wrong, but still doing something wrong would actually exempt you. So therefore, we believe you when you said, I didn't eat it. So now, this isn't so important yet for our purposes. So now, Reisha, my time, Rabbanit. Now, in the Seifa, there's this machloket between them. But the rabbis who exempt from the sacrifice with the 2 witnesses and the denial, right, obligate you, everybody obligates you in the sacrifice when there's 1 witness and you're silent. Okay, so now we're going to try to compare those 2 and say like this. If we want to say, go back to our case, you said I ate chelev and I was silent. Now we said it's either because you're believed to obligate me a korban or because I was silent and I admitted, and that's why I'm obligated to korban. Now, based on what we just said a minute ago, two people can't necessarily cause you to bring a korban if I deny it. So they're going to compare this and say, in the case of two witnesses, we always believe two witnesses. And yet in this case, if I deny it, those two witnesses aren't believed, according to the rabbis, remember? Because we say you're exempt from the sacrifice. So it can't possibly be that one witness, the strength of one witness is going to be stronger than two witnesses. Now, it's true the cases are a little different because in one I denied it, one I didn't. But if we look at the Eidut specifically, and what does it show? It shows that my reaction is what's important and not the Eidim themselves. So therefore, the main point there, since in two witnesses we could have a case where I'm exempt, therefore, and what's the part that exempted me? My words. Therefore, it must be in the other case, my silence is what caused me to be obligated. Okay, so now we're going to say now, therefore, this whole thing with chelev has not, right? It's all shtika koda'ah. That's why. It has nothing to do with Eid Echad Ne'eman. Okay, next one. Next one's a little simpler. Ela svari. It's just logic. What's the logic? It's like a case where I have something. I don't know what it is. It's fat. I don't know, is it forbidden or permitted fat? What happens? Someone comes along, I know that it's permitted fats. I'm allowed to eat it. Now, why is this? This is a classic case. We call this Eid Echad Ne'eman B'Isurin, and that means one witness is believed for saying something is permitted or forbidden. And what's the basis, right? What do we use this for all the time? Eating in someone else's house. How do we know your house is kosher? Because we believe you when you say, I keep a kosher home. Then there becomes a whole thing. Who can you believe? Whatever. But I'm not going to get into that. But and Rashi says it explicitly. He says, if you don't say this, look at line 4 in Rashi on the page. Nobody would be able to eat in their friend's house if we didn't have this. We basically believe, okay, this very interesting, again, it's a long daf. I don't want to get into it too much, but Tosfot has a different proof, and he proves it from the Torah. He says, because we're women, it's also very relevant, when you count the 7 clean days, it says in the Torah, v'safra la. It doesn't say you count 7 clean days. It says she counts for herself, la. La, v'darshan la'atzma. You don't need witnesses to come and prove that you're not bleeding anymore, right? Can you imagine? So you don't need that. There you have it, that people are ne'eman b'isurin. And that is even stronger, because we're going to see that matter is a woman who's in nida to sleep with her husband, like she was in a state of bleeding and forbidden, and it's going to allow her to get out of it, which is a little different than what we're going to see here. Anyway, it's also questions that and answers. I'm not going to get into all those details. But anyway, now it says like this. Wait a minute. Midame, you're comparing the chelev case to our woman who was married and then married someone else and her husband was still alive because of one witness. It's totally different. Midame, hatam lo itchazik isura. Your shuman, this piece of fat, was never, it didn't have a title on a chelev, and now we're saying, oh, it's not chelev, it's shuman. It was nothing, it had no status. And we're just determining what is its status. That's very different than something that was forbidden. This woman was an eshet ish, and now we're permitting her to marry someone else based on the testimony of one witness. That's a totally different category. Number one. So if we don't know otherwise, if we don't accept this testimony, she's going to be a forbidden woman. As opposed to this shuman, which is just suffix. We have no idea what its status is. Number two, there's an important principle. When you're talking about erva and forbidden relationships, you need two witnesses. Has to be. You can't, okay, they learn this davar me'erva. I'm not going to get into the drasha here, but it's clear that when it's erva, and this is clearly ervo, you need two witnesses. So no can do. This doesn't work. And in fact, this is just an aside again. If you want to compare it to something about the chelev, it's more similar to this case. Although in a minute, we're going to reject the comparison. If you have a piece of fat that you know for sure is chelev, you cut it out of the animal and it's clear it's from the place where it's chelev. And then one witness comes along and says, it's not chelev. We don't believe that witness. And that's more similar to our case. She's a married woman, and now you come and prove she's not. We're going to ignore you about that because you're just one witness. So which the Gemara says, no, that's not a fair comparison. Midame. If you know that piece is chaylev, okay, I'm going to give you a better example because it's hard for us to understand the chaylev in the Shuma. This is my right hand, okay? If some witness comes along and says, this is my left hand, we don't believe that witness. 100 witnesses could come along and say, this is your left hand. We're not going to believe those witnesses. That's what it's like, because the chaylev is a reality. There's something, it is chaylev, and we know it's chaylev. Witnesses could come and say whatever the heck they want. That is chaylev. So that's not like our case. Our case, we don't know, is the husband alive or dead? It's true, he left, he was alive, but we don't know his status now. So that's not a fair comparison. So there, right, in our case, here you would believe two witnesses if they said he was dead. So therefore, don't compare it to that. That was just an aside. And therefore, according to that logic, you theoretically could believe one. Okay, so now we still don't know, though, why we could believe one. We haven't found a good comparison. Number 3. Now, if you had an issue with the previous one, that it's not itchazik yisura, this was just a suffix and we don't know what it was and it wasn't in any previous status. Let's take food that you didn't take trumot u'masrot from, the tithes, or something you designated to the temple, or a konam, which is another thing that you swore upon yourself would be forbidden to you, like a vow. Okay, often in vows you say konam ze alai. This object is forbidden to me. So these are all cases where we'll believe one witness to say it's actually not, okay? And not because they got out of it somehow. We'll see in a minute, okay? So we're going to go through the 3 cases. The structure is going to be exactly the same, and they're going to reject this comparison. What they want to say right now before we get to the rejection is, because that's it, we're done. We're going to get to the rejection in a second, which is, these are 3 cases where something was forbidden, and yet we believe someone. If you go to someone's house and you eat fruits that they picked off their tree, and they say, I took the trumot u'masrot from them, we believe them, okay? Obviously, this is only in Israel, no trumot u'masrot outside of Israel. But in Israel, you have to take trumot u'masrot. You believe them. So that's a good example. It was isur when it came off the tree and into your house. It became forbidden until you take the trumot u'masrot. So likewise, they're believed. So here you see, it could be. It doesn't really relate to the erva issue, but in any case, this comparison isn't going to work. Hi, Tevel Hechidam. They say, but wait a minute. What exact case are you talking about? ED day, if it's your own food, like I just explained, my lemons that came off my tree, mishum de biyado litakno. There's a different criteria here. I can fix this. Because I can fix it, okay, this is the same reason why we believe shchita. The animal's not permitted until you do a kosher shchita. So it's also itchazik yisur. How do we permit someone to say it was a kosher shchita? Because I can fix it myself. Okay, maybe I can't slaughter animals, but theoretically I could find someone to slaughter the animal. So I'm believed to say it was a kosher slaughter, because theoretically I could fix it. Ela te'achel my kasaver. Well, now, if it's somebody else, it's going to split up into 2. So now, well, there's 2 options within my relationship to your produce. Some people say, I can take trumot u'masrot from your produce even without your knowledge because it's good for you in the end, because right now you can't eat it and I'll fix it for you. Some people say I can do that. If they say I can do it, then again, it falls into the category of I can fix it myself, and that's why I'm believed. But if we say I can't do it for you, so then maybe that's a good example. If Erechad's Ne'aman, then here it's not biyado l'takno, would prove our point. Va'amar ani yadana be'ben mitaken, and I came and testified, I know you fixed it, you took the trumot u'masrot. He gufa minalam. We actually don't even know the halacha in that case. Not clear that will believe me. Okay, so that doesn't help us. Okay, I see someone asked about what about amei haaretz, right? So this is all. That's what I kind of mentioned before about kashrut. I alluded to it, which basically means that we're believing people who are believed to be Torah keeping Jews. Okay, obviously that becomes a very broad definition and where you draw the line. Okay, so that's a whole question on what basis you believe. If someone's going to be believed, what's the criteria for how they're going to be believed? And it's generally like it would be somewhat having to do with laws of edut, although women aren't usually accepted in court and they are accepted here. There's all the right. Are you shomer Shabbat? There's all different criteria as to how we define that. That's a whole separate question, not to get into here. Hekdesh, nami. So now what about hekdesh? So hekdesh, there's 2 ways. You could be sanctifying my couch, which means I'm giving the value of my couch. So if it's kedushat damim, that just the value of it is sanctified, well, mishum de biyado liftoto, I could redeem it. That's easy. So again, it's in my control. That's why I'm believed, which again has nothing to do with this woman and her husband. It's not in her control at all. If it's an animal that's sanctified to the temple as a sacrifice, I can't just redeem it. But if it's mine, I took a vow to bring this animal. I could go to a chacham and say, listen, I made a mistake. I didn't mean to. I want to undo my vow. You could. And then it would be, again, I can undo it. Ela de'achel, what if it's someone else's? And I say, Yadana be'di itchel mari aleh, I know that they undid their vow. Well, hi gufa minalan. I don't know that that's true, that will believe me about that. Konamot nami, same exact thing with konamot. It's same idea, just minor variations. Konamot is I take a vow that something is konam alai. Now, there's two ways of viewing it. Does that mean it's sanctified, or does that mean it's just forbidden to me? So if you hold yesh me'ila b'konamot that it's sanctified, ukdushat damim nachtalu, then its value is sanctified. Well, then it's just like the hekdesh. We said mishum to be adolif doto. I can redeem it. There's no misuse of consecrated property. It's not consecrated. It's just isur ba'almahu derachav le'akate. I just put an isur upon my shoulders. This is forbidden to me. Well, again, if it's mine, mishum to be adol le'itchalale, I can just undo it. Go to a chacham and say, listen, I made a mistake. I didn't mean to, and they can repeal it. Which means, again, it's in my hands. We don't have any proof that if it's yours, I'm even believed. So basically, all these three are unique cases where either I'm not even sure you'll be believed if it's about someone else, and if it's about yourself, you can fix it, and that's why you're believed, because it's easy enough for you to just fix. And therefore, if you said you did it, we assume you did. Okay? We assume that people don't have any motivation to sin and do something wrong. So if it's hard, then maybe, but if it's easy, we just assume we believe you because you can easily fix it. So we tried to prove from the Torah, from the Chelek case. We tried to prove it logically from a different Chelek case. We tried to prove it logically from Tevel, Hekdesh, and Konamot. Unsuccessful. None of those were like our case. Amar Rabbi Zera. Fourth answer, we finally get to the real answer, and it's not by Torah law at all. Amar Rabbi Zera. Fascinating line. Mitoch chomer she'echmarta aleh b'sofa, hekalta aleh b'tchila. Because the law is so severe and harsh on her at the end, meaning if he turns out alive, we saw that horrible Mishna. She has to get divorced. Her kids are mamzerim. She's right. All these terrible things. She loses her ketubah money. She loses everything because they were so strict with her that enables them to be lenient. It's a little bit strange. Gemara says, "Wait a minute. Lo lechimir v'lo lekel. Why don't you just leave it as is? Don't be so strict on her, and then don't be lenient and just leave the law. Why are you?" That's basically it's saying you've neutralized it by making it so strict, right? You've basically undone what you were trying to do, because in the end, so strict, so lenient, well, right? Too much this way, too much that way, just equals zero. So why don't you just leave it as is and require two witnesses? To which they say, Mishum aguna akilu be'Rabbanan. Famous line. Because of agunot, the rabbis were lenient. They said, listen, we don't want to have situations where women can't get remarried. Now, how does this all work? And why is the woman penalized? And this is really at the crux of this halacha. I wanted to wait till we saw it inside. Basically, what they're saying is, we're going to be lenient and allow you one witness. But this woman knows that if she's wrong and her husband shows up on the scene, her life is ruined, right? Basically, she's got a very rough future. Financially, marriage-wise, right? Her husband she loved all these years, she can't marry him, she can't stay married to her second husband, right? Disaster. So therefore, those chumrot are going to cause her to do her research properly. She's not going to only rely on one witness. She's going to try to uncover every possible thing that she can. This is like a good example when they say, you go to a doctor about your kid and the doctor says one thing or whether it's a therapist and they say, your kid better than anyone else. It's you who's at stake here. So you're going to do everything in your power to figure out, not to leave any stone unturned. And therefore, we assume that if the husband shows up on the scene, it's your fault. Okay. Now, again, it's hard to say this, but that's what they're basically saying. And they're saying two things. One is it's your fault because you didn't research thoroughly. If you researched thoroughly and he was really alive, you would have found him. Number two, it's that, again, you have to, it's a balance thing. We want to be lenient, but we can't just be lenient because then women will just go rely on this, find some witness who lied and go get married. And we want to make sure that you're not relying on false testimony. That's the whole reason for two witnesses, because we're worried one person might lie easily, two people less likely. So we want to make sure that you're relying on this. And therefore, we're going to be strict later on to ensure that you don't just rely on some fake witness, or you bring a fake witness who's willing to, again, part of it is, you can bribe the witness to lie for you. So that's the issue, okay? And that's why this whole halacha is the way it is. Fascinating line and fascinating thing. And you see here that this whole thing is uprooting a Torah law of you need two witnesses. The rabbis have the power sometimes to undo, and this is going to be a topic. It's going to take us for the next few days. And as I said, definite listen to Gefet, because it talks about how much power do the rabbis have in different approaches among the Rishonim about how we view this. Okay, the topic of one of our dapim in the next few days over the Chag is going to be, actually it overrides both dapim. The two next dapim is how much koch do the rabbis have to undo things in the Torah. Fascinating topics. Okay. Now we're going to, for the rest of the daf, this was all 4 attempts to prove Eid Echad Ne'eman in our case and why it is. Now we're going to have a statement of Rav, and then a big attempt to understand it, a statement of Shmuel, a big attempt to understand it, and then we're just going to go back to the Mishna and say one little thing at the end of class. So again, if she marries, then we have to go back, right? And she has to undo both. If he shows up on the scene, she has to get divorced from this one and that one. So, and leave the marriage. Then we'll get to the get and how she needs to get for both of them. But right now, she needs to leave both marriages. Lo shanu ela, when the Mishna said this, they only meant shenisei be'ed echad, if she was married by one witness. Aval niseit al shnei edim lo tetzei. If she was married by 2 witnesses, she doesn't have to get out of the marriage. Now, what they're assuming is she doesn't have to get divorced from the second husband. Now, remember the Mishna said she can go back to the first husband. Here they're assuming, although later we're going to suggest maybe that's not what he meant, but right now they're assuming she doesn't have to get divorced from the second husband, which is very strange. They laughed at him in Israel and said, what are you talking about? The husband shows up, her husband's here, which means her second marriage was totally invalid. How are you letting her stay married to the second husband? You say, it's that they don't recognize him. They don't believe that he's really the husband. The husband shows up, and I'm like, we don't recognize you. You don't look like, right? He claims he's her husband. Like, who are you? So they say, wait. If they don't recognize him, then why, if there's one witness who on his account, she went and married another guy, and this guy shows up and says, I'm the husband, why should we believe him also? Right? She shouldn't have to get divorced. So they have to come up with what exactly is the case. In other words, what happens? Okay, now in the case where Rav is talking about 2 witnesses, you don't have to get divorced from the second husband. 2 witnesses came and said the guy was dead. 2 witnesses say the guy is here, and we left town with him, and we came back with him now. I know you don't recognize him, but we've been with him this whole time. Okay, this reminds me of when I had to renew my kids' passports for American passports. You have to show between ages 0 and 5 and 5 and 10 and 10 and 15. You have to show pictures showing their progression, because kids change and they don't necessarily look the same, and they want to make sure you're not lying and using someone else's photo. So they say here, make sure your kid is really your kid. Here it's the same thing. Maybe the guy changed, doesn't look the same. So we have witnesses that came and said we were with him from the beginning to now. You think it's not the same guy. We say he is, and we've been with him now. We have 2 witnesses that say that against our 2 witnesses in the beginning. So now that's why she doesn't have to get divorced, because it's 2 witnesses versus 2 witnesses. Now we're going to have to see still why not. Hold off. But now they said, how do we know that this situation could happen? Proof from the Torah. Yosef recognized his brothers. Famous story. They didn't know it was Yosef. He knew it was them. How could that possibly be? He explains, he left with not a full beard. He came back with a full beard, right? He was 17 years old at the time. He was young. He didn't have a full beard. Now he had a full beard. They didn't recognize him. So now they say, okay, fine. But still, we have 2 witnesses that say he died, 2 witnesses that say he's alive. That's what we call a dut makcheshet, contradictory testimony. Everything's thrown out. Where does that leave the woman? Well, her status originally, right? It leaves her in her original status. She was a married woman. So she should have to get divorced from the second husband. And what Rav, we think he's saying, is she doesn't have to get divorced from the second husband. So, in the end, this is 2 versus 2. Why are we allowing this? And not only that, if it's 2 versus 2, what do we say? He has to bring a korban out of Safek. because he slept with her. Maybe she was a married woman. We don't know. It's 50-50 because we have two saying this, two saying that. He should have to bring a sacrifice. And Hashem Talo is when you're not sure if you did something wrong, you bring it until such point that you figure out that you did something wrong. So he should atone for his possible sin, which shows it's a sin, which shows he should divorce her. Can't stay married to her if maybe they're doing something wrong. So Amar Rav Sheshet, now he's going to say Rav must have been talking about in a unique case. Okay, let's get ready for this case. She ends up marrying one of the witnesses who said he was dead. You might say that seems he's a little nogea b'davar. How could that be? And we've seen cases where this isn't. Somehow they think that she could. I'm not going to get into that right now, but she married one of the witnesses. Now, why does this help? Asham taloi, you only bring if you're unsure that you did something wrong. Now, this guy was one of the witnesses who said, I know, I saw him dead. He has no doubt in his mind. We have a doubt as the community or the court, because two witnesses said he's alive and that this is the right. We see a guy in front of us, but we just don't know, is he the husband or not? But that person is certain that he saw the person die. So therefore, he should not have to bring an Asham Taloi, because you only bring an Asham Taloi if you're unsure about something. To which they say, what about she? He gufa b'Asham Taloi kama, but she should be in doubt. She should have to bring an Asham Taloi. And again, then she shouldn't be able to stay married to him. Forget about him. Maybe he could, but she can't. Well, it takes two to tango. So they say, but Omeret Barili. She comes along and says, I know this isn't my husband. Okay, you would think she'd be the most believable also. She's the one who lived with him. She says, I know this is not my husband. So now each of them are certain that he's not the person. So now they say, okay, and Sarah, hold off with what you're writing because wait a minute. Then there's no chiddush. If the point is that she's certain and he's certain, and they got married based on that, of course they don't have to get divorced because they did nothing wrong. Yes, there's two witnesses who claim that this is the husband, but we don't have any reason to believe them, and they didn't do anything wrong because they're very sure in their beliefs. Well, what's the chiddush? Afilu Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi. We're not going to really understand this line yet. Even Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi, who had this argument, okay, this is Rav talking. Even the Tana who disagreed with another Tana about this would agree about this. Okay, so let's see what this is. Right? Lo ka'amar ela kishabau edim b'achar kach niseit. He's much more strict, but that's only when the edim came and then they got married. This is what you wrote, Sarah. They should have never got married in the first place. Well, it depends when they got married. They could have gotten married before the second set of witnesses came along, right? We're assuming actually until this point that they were married before the second set of witnesses came along. But Rabbi Menachem, Rabbi Yossi, who thinks in a certain case they'd have to get divorced, in this case, he thinks niseit v'achar kach ba'u edim. If they got married and then the witnesses came and said, oh, here's the husband, then lo amar. Even Rabbi Menachem, Rabbi Yossi would assume it's okay. Now, where is this machloket and what is it? Tanya. Let's ignore right now what she and the husband say. Okay, that's not relevant. What's relevant here is if you have contradictory witnesses, two say he died and two say here he is. Okay, and we don't know for sure that that's him. Okay, that he's the husband, like our case. So two people say he's dead and two people say he's not dead. Okay, this maybe he's not here, and it's not that we don't know who he is, but the point, right? Maybe he's just not here, and we have testimony. Two people say he died and two people say he didn't die. We've seen him alive somewhere and he's not in front of us. But it would be similar to our case where he's in front of us and they say that's not my husband. The woman goes to get married and they say, but wait, you were married. And two witnesses come and say, well, it's true, she was married, but she got divorced. And two other witnesses, no, we know she didn't get divorced. So again, contradictory testimony. Everyone agrees she can't get married based on this testimony because there's a debate about her status. But if she gets married anyway against this, lo tetzeh. It's fine because there's a doubt anyway. This is exactly where Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi amar tetzeh. She has to get divorced. So amar Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi emat ani omer tetzeh. When do I say that she has to get divorced? Only depending on the order. Bizman shabau edim v'achar kach niseit. If already both sets of witnesses have come and there's contradictory testimony, we don't know her status. Then she shouldn't get married, and if she does, she has to get divorced. But aval niseit, which is the case we assumed we were discussing, she got married based on the first group of witnesses who said he was dead. So she got married fair and square, legitimately. V'achar kach ba'u edim, then witnesses come. Hareza lo tetzeh, she doesn't have to get divorced from the second guy because maybe they're not telling the truth, and she did what she did legitimately. So now we're basically saying, if that's what Rav is saying, which we just explained, that's what Rav is saying, he has nothing to add in addition to this machloket tanaim. We'll all agree about that case. So answer number one, maybe that Rav is talking about the other case. Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi disagrees. Kika Amar Rav Nami, we assumed we were talking about where they got married first and then the witnesses came, but maybe it's the reverse. Kika Amar Rav Nami, Bisman Shabal Eidim, B'achar Kach Nisei. It was when both sets of witnesses had already come. There was a question about her status. She went and got married anyway. Then Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi would say, you have to get divorced. Tanakama says no. So when Rav says, you don't have to get divorced, Lafu came into Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi says, I don't agree with him. And that's what Rav means. Some people say it's the opposite. It's Tama Denise B'achar Kach Ba'u Eidim. Specifically in the case where she got married and then the witnesses came. And that's when he says, Lo Teitzei, Aval, Ba'u Eidim, B'achar Kach Nisei. But if witnesses came and then she got married, she would have to get divorced. Now, Rav was saying in this case she doesn't, but in that case she would. And what's he trying to say? I hold like Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi. Kiman, Ki Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi. So we have two ways to understand Rav. Now, is he agreeing with Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi? Is he not agreeing with him? But the whole point is, it is needed to say because there's a disagreement about exactly the case. It really depends on which case you say Rav is talking about, what the order was. Okay, we know what Rav is talking about right now, according to this interpretation. Rav is talking about two witnesses came and said he was alive. Two witnesses came and, he was dead. Two witnesses came and said he's alive, but the woman and the husband deny that he's alive. They don't think that that guy who's alive is the husband. And the question just becomes, did Rav mean that they had already got married before the second set of witnesses came, or did they get married after? And does he agree with Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi or not? Okay, that's the debate. That's left up in the air. But to this explanation, Mativ Rava questions and says, one minute. We have a source that says, different source, talking about a Kohen who either goes into a cemetery where he's not allowed to, or becomes impure to a dead body, or marries a woman he's not allowed to marry. If he doesn't want to divorce her or get out of the cemetery, dafno, we can beat him up. Okay, we're going to ignore the cemetery issue. It has nothing to do with us. Now we're just going to focus on the marriage issue. We beat him up to get him to divorce her. Talmud Lomar, how do we know this? Because it says, he has to be sanctified, and it says even like, we sanctify him, meaning we can get involved. So, Hechidami, what's the case here? Now, they're going to assume this isn't a basic case where a Kohen marries a Grusha, because if he did, well, obviously you have to force him. Any Torah law can be enforced. So it must be something more unique, and it must be like our case, where he was married to a woman whose husband was questioned whether he was alive or not. Let's say it wasn't like the case for Rav. She wasn't married. He wasn't one of the witnesses. And Loka Amar Barili, and she didn't say, I'm sure that that's not my husband. Sricha Lememar did Dafno. Well, then for sure, of course, we have to beat him to divorce her. Of course, he has to divorce her in that case. And Lalav, because, right, maybe they're doing an Avera, and Hashem Taloi kicks in, and of course, you have to divorce. Sricha and Lalav, it must be, it must be exactly the case we explained Rav is saying. It must be, she said, I know for sure that's not my husband. And he said, I know for sure your husband's dead. And what does it say here? No, we beat him up and make him divorce her. So what do you see? Right? The Kohen has to divorce the wife because she's forbidden to him because maybe she's married to somebody else. Maybe, right? On that basis. Now, we just said, Rav said, you don't have to divorce in this case because they're certain that they're right. So here you see, they do. So how do we resolve this? Well, three answers. Number one, we could say, Isur Kuhuna Shani. Maybe a Kohen marrying the wrong person is much worse. And we have to be stricter with Kohanim. That was the whole drashat. Hidashto. We have higher standards for Kohanim. Number two, Ibai Tema. Also higher standards for Kohanim, but differently. Dafno doesn't mean we beat him up till he divorces her. My Dafno be'edim. We force them to look further. We have witnesses to say this. We have witnesses to say that. We force them, if they want to stay married, go find more witnesses that can corroborate your side of the story. Number three, Ibai Tema. And then again, that would only be Kohanim. Ibai Tema. Maybe this is all talking about, and then it's for everybody, and it's saying we paskin like Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi, the source, and it holds. It's when both sets of witnesses had come and they went ahead and married anyway, and then it just fits with what we suggested before. We pointed out his opinion is different, at least according to one reading. Okay, that was all assuming Rav when he made this statement. Lo shanu ela shedi say be'erecha. But if they were married by two witnesses, lo teisei, she doesn't have to get divorced from the second husband. And that was all an attempt to explain it by saying it was when she and he are clear, the guy in front of us, they don't believe is the husband. But Rav Ashi Omer, my lo tetzei dekama Rav, lo tetzei me'atera rishon. What it means is she can't stay married to, right? I'm sorry, she doesn't have to get divorced from the first husband, which is what's written in the Mishna, right? If two witnesses come and she gets married based on two witnesses, and then shows up the husband, the second marriage was never a marriage. The first marriage is valid. She can go back to her first husband. And that's what Rav is saying, to which the Gemara obviously asks, wait a minute, why would Rav say this? It was explicit in the Mishnah, and more so than that, Rav actually paskins like the Mishnah. Rav already said this. Right? If she's married against, right, this we said was with two witnesses, she can go back to him. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, this is the halacha, right? Rav paskins like the Mishnah. So why would Rav need to say this statement, which says exactly the same thing? To which they say, this is a much easier way of reading Rav. We wouldn't have gotten into all those side things. Basically, Rav means the halacha in the Mishnah, and it's just that he said halacha is like the Mishnah. Maybe that came from this statement. This is a statement he made, and they said, oh, you can see from here, he paskins this way, and it's all really one and the same, and that's Rav. Okay, next, Shmuel's statement about the Mishnah. Each is kind of clarifying the Mishnah in the end. It's possible Rav was clarifying the Mishnah according to the first reading. According to the second reading, he was just passing about the Mishnah. Amar Shmuel, lo shanu ela shalom mechashto, aval mechashto lo tetzeh. So it's only if she doesn't deny. But if she denies it, then she doesn't have to get divorced. So what are we talking about? B'maya skinan. Ilema bebeitre. Okay, so now what happens here? Two witnesses come, okay, and say, what one witness came and said, we're now talking about the one witness case. One witness came and said he died. Then two witnesses came and said he's alive. And then she denies it. In that case, then we believe, right, if she, if she says, right, right, if she's silent, then she has to get divorced. But if she denies it, lo tetzeh, she doesn't have to get divorced. So again, b'maya skina, we don't really know how many said it at first. Let's try to go through it. That's why I got stuck from it. Ilema bebeitre, if there were two witnesses who came and said, the guy's alive, ki mechashtu lehem mahave. So what if she denies it? If two witnesses come and say her denial is irrelevant, we have one witness who said he died, two witnesses who say he didn't die. So we obviously believe the two witnesses. Ela bechad. So now, if it's one witness said he died, one witness said he's alive. Tama, it sounds like what Shmuel's saying is Tama de mekashto. It's only because he denied it. Hashatka, but she denied it. That we're not going to say, right, that we say lo tetzeh. Hashatka, if she was silent, tetzeh. Now, this doesn't make any sense. Why? We have one witness who said he's dead. Now, what did we say? We believe that one witness, like that witness is two. Now comes one witness to say the guy is alive. That's one witness against two, even though it's not. It's really against one, but it's like it's against two. Ula said, anytime we say one witness is believed like two, they're like two. So if it's one witness who came and said he's dead, which we believe like two, we have two witnesses. Then we have one witness who say the guy's alive, and we have the woman, which it all depends on whether she agrees or doesn't agree. It shouldn't at all. The one witness should never be believed against the two. That's our big question. So one never stands in front of two. Now, it's not really one against two, it's one against one. That's what's tricky. But the first one is considered like two because that's what we already learned because of aguna. So what's the answer? We're talking about two witnesses. Go back. Okay, even though we said two, right? One witness came and said the person's dead. Two witnesses come and say he's really alive. Of course, we're going to believe those two witnesses. Well, maybe not, because maybe those two witnesses are psule edut. Maybe they're weaker witnesses. Okay? Uchid Rabbi Nechemia, the Amar Rabbi Nechemia. Kol makom shemina Torah ed echad. 1 second. Right. So kol makom shemina Torah ed echad. Halach achar rov deot. Vastu shtei nashim b'ish echad kishnei anashim b'ish echad. This is a very interesting halacha. When the Torah believes one witness to be like two, or the Torah believes a woman to be accepted, even though normally her testimony is not accepted, like in our case. Instead of saying it's true, we say that one's believed like two. But if people come and start arguing against it, even psula eding, we ignore basic laws of witnesses, like one witness is like two. No, we go back to numbers. So one witness said he was dead, even though we counted it like two. Two witnesses say he's alive. That's 2 versus 1. And it all depends now. Does the woman deny it or does she accept it? That's why it's going to be a numbers game. How many people say yes? How many people say no? Because this is out of the realm of normal testimony. That's what Rabbi Nechemia says. That's one way to understand Shmuel. Another alternative is to say, if one witness who's kasher comes in the beginning, then it doesn't matter what comes after. That one witness is believed like 100. Okay? Now, in other words, if 100 women come who are not generally accepted, they're not going to go against that one kosher witness. But what's Shmuel talking about? It was a woman who's generally not accepted. She was the one witness in the beginning. And he explains Rabbi Nechemia like this. Rabbi Nechemia omer, kol makom she'min Torah ed echad, halach achar rov deot, va'asu, follow this, shtei nashim b'isha achat, 2 women against 1 woman, which are all psulei dud in general, ki shnei anashim b'ish echad. It's like 2 against 1. Again, it's because that one was believed as 2, but not if she's a non-kosher witness. If she was a kosher witness, a man, she'd be believed like 2. But because she's a woman, she's believed as 1. Okay, I'm not going to get into, again, we don't have time today, but the whole thing of women psulei dud, we'll get to that later. But just assume, by Torah law, women aren't accepted. Again, it has to be understood somewhat societal, based in their times, etc. I don't want to deal with this today. But 2 women against 1 woman is really a numbers game, 2 against 1. If it were 2 women against 1 man, well, kosher witness, or by the way, it could be a relative or something, would be the same thing here. Then it's like 2 against 2. So what Shmuel is talking about is when there's 2 against 1, and then the woman denies, then it ends up 2 women against 2 women, and we're going to say lo te, right? Then again, what did he say? Lo shanu ela machashto. If she denies it, lo te, then she doesn't have to get out of the marriage. Last part for today, tzricha get mizeh umizeh. She needs a get from both. Bishlama mi rishon tibai get. Now again, what happens? One witness came, she married this and the second guy. In the end, the husband was alive. We're not talking about where we don't know if the husband was alive or not. Husband shows up on the scene, clearly the husband. Now, she is technically only married to the first. She's not married to the second one because ein kiddushin tovsim. There is no valid marriage when you're a married woman, even though she thought there was, but really there isn't. So why does she need to get from the second guy? It says she needs to get from both. She need to get, she's not married. Just like sleeping with someone, while you're married to somebody else, you don't need to get from them. You didn't marry them. It's a gzera. We're worried what people will say. People will see that you were married to him, and now they'll see you're not married to him and you're married to someone else. They'll say, they'll think that when she remarries a third guy, that she got remarried without a get because they saw she was married to someone, and they'll think, oh, maybe you don't need a get. Even though it's a bit strange, people would think you don't need a get, but it'll cause confusion. So, wait a minute then. The continuation of the Mishna says, if she was only betrothed to the second husband, what did the Mishna say? Might not remember, but I'll remind you. Then her husband shows up. She can go back to her original husband because she was only betrothed to the second guy. She didn't actually sleep with him. So why wouldn't you need to get then? Theoretically, right? Now, when you're betrothed, engaged, you need a divorce from that. Now, if people see that she was with this guy, she didn't get a divorce from him, she was betrothed to him, didn't get a divorce, they'll think, and this is all the more so, you might think people would more likely be worried that you would think maybe you don't need a get from an engagement. So that will cause, if she doesn't get a get there, and it didn't say she needed a get, all it said was, and this is important, it said she can go back to her original husband. It didn't say anything about a get. So what does the Gemara say? Right, and then, people will think a betrothed woman gets to go out of a relationship without a get. So the answer, even though it didn't say so in the Mishnah, lo olam buy a get. You really do need a get, okay? Even though it didn't say so. Now, later in the Gemara, tomorrow's daf, you'll see, in the end, they say you don't need a get. But right now, they're going to assume it must be you need a get because really it doesn't make sense. But wait a minute. If you need a get, what's the issue now? This is going to look like, now you weren't really married to the second guy, you only need to get michumra, but it's going to look like you were betrothed to someone in the interim and now go back to your original husband, right? And that's a problem because it says you can go back to your original husband. But if you got to get from him, it's going to be clear you were betrothed to someone in the middle, and that's not allowed. That's machzir gushato, which is forbidden. Well, they say, no, don't worry. You can answer like Rabbi Yosef ben Kippur, Da'amal mina nisua nasura mina egus muter. Masir gushato is only forbidden, according to him, if you're actually married to the second guy, and not if you were betrothed. That's why there's no concern. If you give a get, people will assume the betrothal was valid. Remember, the betrothal wasn't valid. But we're going to make you get a get l'chumra. It's going to look like, this is what we call reach get. It seems like you have a get. It's going to cause people to think there was a get. It's going to cause people to know that you were actually betrothed or think that you were. And therefore, we're going to assume that people can be machzir grushato, but we don't care actually about machzir grushato because this holds like Rabbi Yosef ben Kippur, who says you can actually go back even after you're betrothed. Okay, this is going to continue this line into tomorrow's Daf. We will stop here for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom. Chag Shavuot Sameach. The Shiurim are already up on the site, so you can follow them there. And on Monday, which is Chag in Chutz La'aretz, but not in Israel, we'll have the regular Zoom. So anyone keeping Chag can, in Chutz La'aretz, you can listen to the Shiurim after Shavuot. Have a great day, everybody.